Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Tuesday, February 4th, 2025 Haldane Board of Education Business Meeting. Please stand for the pledge of, I'm calling the meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay.
President Clements,
Here.
Vice President Valentine,
Here.
Trustee McNow,
Here.
Trustee Cupper,
Here.
Trustee Clemenson.
Here.
Okay, so I don't believe we have any changes to the agenda, so we'll start by approving the agenda, please.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the agenda as written.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so our next meeting will be a workshop meeting held on, our next public meeting will be a workshop meeting held on Tuesday, February 25th at 7 o'clock here in the high school, middle school library. And the topic will be, of the workshop topic will be an update on our universal pre-K program, so that's exciting. And then the board will meet, but then immediately go into executive session on February 12th, February 13th, and February 25th for matters leading to the appointment of a particular person, that being our long-term superintendent. Also, we're actually at the point of the year where it's time to start thinking about our Haldane Board of Education trustee elections, which will happen with the annual budget vote on May 20th. So petitions are available in the district office if you are interested in running for the school board. Petitions are available in the district office or by contacting our district clerk, Megan Shields. And the petitions signed and completed petitions and the first campaign expenditure statement are due no later than 3 p.m. on Monday, April 21st, 2025. So if you're interested in running, you need to get your petition, you need to get your signatures, and you need to get all of that turned in by April 21st. We have 2 seats open for this year, 2 3-year terms. And as I said earlier, the annual district meeting when we'll be voting for the budget as well as the trustees for the next term will be on May 20th, 2025. As always, the 3rd Tuesday in May. All right, and then I just have a couple of other comments. I had the opportunity to go to 2 student performances over the past 2 Fridays, and they're different from each other, and I think they provide a really nice contrast, and I wanted to just talk about them for a few minutes. So I don't know, actually I saw Rosie Valentine starring in Jungle Book, the elementary musical, 2 Fridays ago, and it was a darling show. It was so impressive, incredible sets, incredible costumes, incredible makeup. So many people from the community had clearly put so much work into it. It was really a super, super delightful and a special evening. And then last Friday, Mrs. Sniffen and I drove up to an a cappella invitational, which was at Hyde Park, and it was Haldane and a couple of groups from Cornwall. Hyde Park was there, Arlington, I think that was it. And it was a very different event. It was, the students had been there all afternoon. It was way more low key. It was lots of different types of students from these different schools and these a cappella groups. And of course the students had their directors there, but you know, these a cappella groups, there's students on the stage singing, you know, being kind of led by themselves. And they were having so much fun. And I really loved having the opportunity to see those 2 really different kinds of performances that our students had the opportunity to participate in sort of week to week. And it made me, it was one of those events that just made me very happy to be doing, you know, what we're doing, you know, supporting these kinds of things that, you know, normally we might not know about. Like, you know, there were certainly parents there, but not a big crowd from Haldane. So anyway, it was great. So those are my comments. Mr. Obaka.
Sure. And I'll just add, shout out to Sam Sauer.
Oh, I should have said that, yes. And Ms.
Yeah,
Dean,
yeah. He, it occurred to me, the performance was just the perfect choice. And I think what it speaks to is his ability to understand and know the students really well and understand what play is appropriate for them, and that they could handle and that they could shine, and they certainly did.
Oh my
And
God, it
really
was amazing.
kudos to him, because my understanding is he does this year after year. And in speaking with Christine, he's incredibly thoughtful about the selection, and of course works very hard to get them prepared. So it was a wonderful.
Yeah, and then so that was actually Mr. Sauer, because he did that, and then he also leads the Blue Note. So it was I had 2 weekends of Mr. Sauer entertainment. It was great.
Fantastic. So I have 2 more legislative topics. Just they're kind of like follow-ups, just to keep the board updated in the community. Smartphones. So at our last board meeting, I was anticipating incorrectly that there may be a bit more local control with smartphones. The governor, though, after our last meeting, rolled out her legislative proposal for a smartphone ban in schools. And it is much more restrictive than I anticipated. Now, I want to emphasize it's not final yet. It has to go through the legislative process. But if you read through it carefully, it's basically from the bell to the bell. There are no smartphones, no smart watches, no devices whatsoever that can access the internet. This includes lunch, recess, passing periods, not just for K-8, but also high school. You also can't have a smartphone on campus, which I think would be a bit of a challenge. We do have a rather large campus. You literally need to be off school property. Also, she is allocating or recommending an allocation of $13.5 million for storage, things, and we more or less have that covered. I think we're in good shape there. However, the other thing that was a little concerning to me is that each year our principals would need to do an analysis of who did not comply with our smartphone ban and what discipline was imposed, and that information would have to be reported to state ed. So, from my perspective, that is just an additional burden. And I do foresee some challenges, particularly with our high school students and having an open campus for juniors and seniors. I think it could be a challenge. And there are some in the assembly that have supported this and basically, voice that support. But there is also a bit of pushback. Like School Boards Association is pushing back to give districts, not to not have a ban, but to give districts a bit more local control. And again, we in speaking with the admin team, we believe we have right now a policy in place, not an official board policy, but what we have in place is no smartphones, bell to bell, K-8. But in high school, there is a bit more flexibility. There are no smartphones allowed during instructional time, but during recess, during lunch, open campus, if students are outside, we currently are allowing them. So that may need to change. We probably will know more in a few months. And if this is supported and stays in the final plan from New York State, of course, we will comply. And it would require a policy. So board policy committee would get some feedback from our admin team. But I just wanted you to know, I didn't expect it to be this strict. So we may have some more work to do in tightening up our policy if this is approved. And I'm happy to take any questions from the board or any thoughts.
Local assembly, Senate, I'm sure have already been informed by school boards in the area and districts in the area regarding this policy. And obviously, our association's lobbying. And anything that they've read in the tea leaves, that this is the first foray of a needless negotiation, or
it was, I have to admit, it was a little surprising. I mean, even in my superintendent's group, I think the hope was that we support no smartphones during instructional time, and that's speaking for the Lower Hudson Council of School Superintendents. But we also were advocating for some local control over this. And again, I think more for high schools. And so we were a little surprised. But as far as, any prediction of what the outcome will be, I really don't know. I was a little surprised by how restrictive the governor's proposal was.
Yeah. And it's been, we have a very small school district, school districts that are incredibly large with, very large high schools, 1,500, 2,000 kids. Some of them have implemented the, like where you got to put it in like a pocket thing. There are issues with that, and costs and time and manpower. And that would become, like you said, there would be restrictions that would be put on districts by that, and that could be problematic.
And how are they defining what counts as a smart device? Is it just phones? Is it phones and watches? Is it iPads? There's a variety of things that you can use to access the internet or to communicate with other folks.
All of the above, as far as what I'm reading, Sean.
And there are, we have devices on campus that students have access to that could be considered mobile devices. Is that if they're in use, or are they in one way or another provided by the district? Or
school issued devices would be fine because we can
you
control and block access to the internet and social media. But if you bring a device from home, that's the concern. We also talked about, in the superintendent's group, made some proposals. One idea was, there has to be technology that could potentially, schools could use to block, even on a personal device, could block access to the internet as well as social media. I don't know exactly what that looks like. That's a technology that's probably a little above me and my knowledge, but there are many that think that the technology exists. The other thing is, you do see some other countries. I think New Zealand, for example, has a strict ban on social media until you're 16. Here, no one in government is really holding the social media companies accountable. And younger children have easy access. They could just put in any birth date, is my understanding, and be on social media. So if that is the real concern, why are we not doing more to push back on Facebook and Instagram and some of the social media? So
Kids use VPNs anyway.
Yeah.
The whole time. So even on your on the Wi-Fi systems, teachers usually have to say, buddy, you can't get onto Google Classroom right now because you got to close your VPN on your phone. Then it'll work, So it'll always be a cat and mouse game anyway.
Yeah.
On the tech side of like what we can block and what we can't. So the expectation is obviously not in learning environments. That's the key, right? And then there's just so many different districts. Wow, that'll be tough.
One of the things I find so disappointing about this and frustrating is it's another situation where what you have is really a societal problem, right? You have a problem that's being driven, honestly, by corporations that are making a lot of money, right? I mean, that's the social media, but it's a societal problem, and it's, everybody needs to be thinking about it, but the responsibility has now come. Schools are being held accountable. And when already schools are places where kids have less access to social media. I mean, yes, of course you can be on your phone, but like it is a place where kids are being supervised by, trained expert adults who are committed to students, learning and I don't know, like, it's just that's a frustrating piece.
I also find it somewhat tone deaf, especially, if you think about like our administrative team here, that, the team read Stolen Focus, right? Across with teachers, to really understand the, the systems, like the, kind of the systematic stealing of our attention through these devices. and have done a really good job at trying to go through these steps to see what works and, to roll out an effective policy at the high school. And we've had students here at our meeting talk about, improved interaction, with one another, improved attention in classes because of it, and just having like a break, from that device, and that was done without this type of rollout that may come down the pike. So kudos to our team, right? And to admin for rolling that out and kind of educating and bringing people up to speed. And it's just, my hope is obviously common sense would win the day.
Well, we do all either individually or, I think we could decide as a board if I were to write a letter, but this is an opportunity for people to, contact our legislators and, express, not on behalf of the school board if you're writing on your own, but as somebody who is involved in public education, this is our belief. So that's certainly something that we each can do. I appreciate that update. And also for you clarifying, I think we, last time we were expecting it to be different. I know I saw her proposal as quite a shock.
And the last update I have, and I received a few inquiries and emails regarding this, but immigration and customs enforcement potentially on school grounds. And this has been in the news a lot. And the board, I think, is aware of this, but also for the community. There was a U.S. Supreme Court decision in 1982, Plyer versus Doe, which basically it requires all schools in all states across the country to provide a free public education to all students. Even if it doesn't matter if they are immigrants, their parents are immigrants, they are entitled to a free education. So we also, part of that is we do not ask if you are, if you are legally immigrated or illegal. We do not ask that. We do not save that information about our students. So that's one thing I just wanted to make clear. And it's probably good that we are unaware, because then we treat everyone as they ought to be treated. Also, there are state laws. So there is a New York State, forgive me, the New York Family Court Act, and then there's also FERPA, which is the acronym for Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. So state and federal law that protects students' right to privacy. So with that, we certainly all abide by that. I think our admin team certainly, and as well as our faculty, understand, and all our office employees understand how important student privacy is. But the question has come up, what if an ICE, customs agent showed up here at the district? What would you do? And we have consulted with our school attorneys. While we don't think it's likely, if it were to happen immediately, the people would contact me and I would contact our law firm. We believe that there may be an exception if there is a warrant signed by a judge, and that is the only exception. That, of course, is unlikely with school-aged children, but that could be the only exception. And then we would receive guidance from our attorney on that, but we would not allow anyone into the school or to access information or to speak with one of our students. So I think the board probably knows all of that, but I just wanted to make sure and say that publicly, that we view our school as a safe haven for all children that are here. Certainly we would comply if we found a warrant and our lawyers told us we needed to comply, but we would make sure we went through the proper channels. Any questions or comments? Okay.
All right.
That's all I have.
Thank you. All right. So over the last couple of meetings, we've talked about the volunteer firefighter and ambulance worker tax exemption. To actually, before we approve that, what we discussed last week, we're required to hold a public meeting. So I am now, apologies for coughing, opening that public meeting. For those who are watching, there's not that many members from the public.
Y'all count though.
So unless any board members object, I'm going to close the public meeting.
That's probably a good idea.
Yeah. All right. And just so people know who are watching, I did let both of our local fire departments know where we had arrived on this and that we were having this public hearing. I'm so sorry. And now I'm going to stop talking because it's time for a budget presentation.
There we go.
There we go.
Good break, good break.
So much.
Okay, so this is really just a preliminary look at the budget. We have been working internally, Catherine, doing the bulk of the work, but the entire admin team has been meeting regularly, talking about next year, looking at some budget priorities. But let me begin by just taking you through the goals. And this is our first official budget presentation is March 4th. So this is a preliminary look at goals, priorities, and we will share some information that we have just on financial information as far as revenues. But we do welcome your feedback this evening on any of these points that we're showing you. So first, one goal is to stay within the allowable. I think that is usually a goal every year, but particularly this year, after getting support for our capital project, recognizing that there is a significant tax increase that is associated with that, we think more than ever we have to work very hard to make sure we are within the allowable. Also, developing a budget aligned with Haldane's core missions and beliefs. I think that is a standard every year. Also, prioritizing operational efficiencies and maximizing the use of resources while maintaining quality programs and services. So that's a lot of the internal work that I spoke about. The team is looking for efficiencies. Are there, better use of some, whether it's human resources or other resources, there are grants available, whatever we can do to look for efficiencies. The next bullet is develop a plan for long-term capital improvements. As you may recall, we are using some of our capital reserve fund to offset the cost of the $28 million capital project. There was a limit on that fund. So as we go through the process, Catherine has made a recommendation, which I certainly support, and I think it's wise to ask the public to raise the limit on that reserve fund, and then over time, try to replenish it and build it back up, because although with the $28 million project, we're going to accomplish a lot here, there are still needs, of course, particularly in the main building. Next, pursue funding opportunities to support the transition to zero emission buses. We have our EPA grants submitted, which I mentioned last meeting. Just last week, we met with our consultant. We are pursuing the NYSERDA grant money as well. We are not going to wait till April when we'll learn about EPA. I will say the consultant said there's a bit of concern that there may be a pullback on that EPA money. We're not certain, but some optimistic news was that some districts last year that were approved for EPA money in our area, they may not be accessing all of it. And there may be a possibility where the district decides not to purchase an electric bus, that the consultant can apply those funds to another district who's interested. So I will keep you informed of that. There's no guarantees there, but that may be another avenue just in case we're either not approved or the EPA money is pulled back. Lastly, and as always, provide a transparent, comprehensive communication to the Haldane community about budget decisions and their impact. So I'm going to just pause a minute, and if the board, any thoughts, any recommendations with those goals? Are you comfortable with them? And but, yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just also gonna add, Peggy and Maggie have already had a preview of this, but really our other three, we wanted the entire board to see this and make sure you're in agreement.
So with the funding, pursue funding opportunities to support the transition to zero emission buses, that's what we're concentrating on now, is getting the funding for that, right? As opposed to actually putting some of the budget toward a purchase. We're not at the buying the bus at this moment. We're seeing what we can get in terms of funding before we move forward with the purchase.
At a later slide, I'll explain a bit more, but we're actually pursuing both. So we do have one large bus that is at end of life. We also have a smaller bus that will be reaching end of life. We think we could do with overall one less bus and convert a smaller bus that we just purchased, I think about a year ago. We need to convert it to all-wheel drive. So if we may need to purchase one more diesel bus, even if we get approved for the EPA money. We have a legal obligation certainly to provide transportation for all of our students. So that will be a proposition, recommendation from us. And of course, the board has to, approve that, but we do recommend have the prop, and if the EV money comes in and we can move swiftly, then we'd prefer to buy EV, of course.
Yeah, and I just, because we always sort of did that, right? That was just the idea that it was sort of a tax neutral thing where we replace the bus as it needed to be replaced every year. So we're still kind of sticking with that for right now.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, we may not have a choice, and we need to purchase one.
Carl, just real quick on that, because May raised an important point, and then you said that you might throw that in this exact budget. It might come up soon, but don't we need like power from Cedar Street and those types of things? So
We do.
yeah,
We do. So Highland Electric, the consulting company that we are working with, they'll be on site. They were hoping this week, it may happen next week. They'll be on site to assess whether we can run power from Cedar Street or power from 9D.
Okay.
They're also doing some work from their office, speaking with Central Hudson, but it would be more expensive, obviously, running it from 9D. We're hoping, but they think Cedar Street might be an option for us. But yes, we need charging stations.
and there wasn't there a discussion last year about the town doing work?
Yeah, I didn't
And
think
we
we were
wanted-
there yet. We're
Yeah.
not quite there yet, are we? Like with talks about infrastructure and everything, or we are there?
Well,
Well, shared costs would be great.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
yeah,
Right? So if someone's opening something and we can jump in on it there at that point, that'd be sweet, right? But is that coordination at all taking place, or?
well, I can say this as we're planning site work with CS Arch for the capital project.
Of course, yeah.
We've let them know that we're very interested in charging stations. So we are planning for, a location. I think it's unrealistic, but I want to manage expectations for the community. I don't think you'll have an EV bus on the road next school year. I think it's possible in the following year, which would be 26, 27.
Okay.
Okay?
And I just like a little clarification on the develop a plan for long-term capital improvements. You mentioned raising the limit on the capital reserve fund for, how does that get determined? And like, that's for current long-term program, like we need to draw from that fund to finish off capital improvements that are already going on?
When we originally set up what we could put in our capital reserve, the limit was set at $1 million. So we currently have $1 million sitting in our capital reserve fund. But we have allocated all of that to the capital proposition. So I don't think $1 million is enough with what we need to do over the remaining years while we're in the middle of the capital project. So I'm recommending that we raise the threshold that we're allowed to put into the capital reserve. And if at the end of the year, when we look at where our fund balance is, that would be a place that we could put fund balance and then have it available for use for other maintenance or capital needs that are not included in the capital proposition.
Thank you.
Catherine, am I correct in saying the money that goes into the capital reserve fund, if you do in the future, let's say 3 years from now, you want to do a project in the main building, you need voter approval, I believe?
You do unless it's an emergency situation. You can always use it in case if something, dire happened.
Well, Catherine, that would then be considered reserved fund balance, not unreserved fund balance, right?
Okay.
Oh, the one thing, I think maybe because it's already a district goal, and I should have cut this before, but I think our other goal, I know you're planning for this, is just getting our pre-K program kicked off for next year.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, and we could move it up to the goals, but it's under priorities.
Yeah, okay, got it.
We do have it under priorities.
Okay, that makes sense.
So this next slide, in previous budget presentations, just a review of some things that the district has made investments in. And, just within the past 2 to 3 years, you made some significant investments in staffing increases and programmatic improvements. So just to mention a few, ENL teacher was added, world language teacher, a school counselor. We had a part-time school psychologist that was made whole, and the district has hired 2 special education teachers. So in looking, our enrollment is relatively flat. In speaking with the admin team and doing an analysis, we don't think there is a need for increased staffing this year. And of course, HR is probably 75 to 80% of the budget. Those are big cost drivers as you add people and professionals. But we really think you've made some really important decisions in recent budgets, and it has us in a good place looking ahead towards the year ahead. Okay, so that's just a reminder of what we've done recently. We are not making any significant HR recommendations. Now, moving on to priorities. So curriculum development, you've heard a number of presentations from our admin team. We definitely will make sure money is allocated, particularly for a number of curriculum improvements and some PD around that, but also a literacy program for pre-K through 2nd grade. That would be certainly aligned with the science of reading, and again, we had a presentation on that from our principal. Also, Regina Cashin is working on a multi-tiered system of support software. So, this is our response to intervention. What we would like to do is to become more efficient and have the data at the teacher's fingertips to implement a software program. There would be some initial expense and then some ongoing maintenance expense to the software, but it would really make our staff and team more efficient with supporting students. Pre-K program is next. Definitely, we're planning to launch that program. It is open enrollment right now through the end of March. It's been a little slow in the beginning for not only pre-K, but K. We think because we've given people till the end of March, they're gradually trickling in. So I think we have about a half dozen signed up for both pre-K and about 5 or 6 for kindergarten. So we're not that alarmed. We do think that that'll continue to fill up. We're excited. I know Ms. Jamin has some information nights coming up, and we're really trying to get the word out there. Also, Ms. Sniffen has recommended a new high school geography course. So there's some work around that, just working with selected teacher, curriculum, resources, maybe some PD. This budget will support that as well. This one, again, I think it's an important reminder, mental health and guidance. We want to maintain what we have. We do think we're at a good level. I think it was a very important investment that this district made to support our students' mental health. Special education, we are going to recommend increasing funding to address a growing need for students with disability. There is a particular placement that may be a high level placement that we're anticipating in the budget as well. Also, our softball field, the boys athletic field does have a dugout. The girls field, we've done a lot of upgrades, but we do think it's important to have a dugout on the softball field. We do have some parents actively fundraising, and we appreciate that. But what we'd like to do is see how that fundraising progresses over the next month or so, and then also commit to district funds to make sure that that happens. So we have some equality there, and that would then take place next year. We don't think it'll be in place for this spring.
Do you mind if I say something right
Sure.
now, just now? I think, and I don't know, the board's aware of this, but maybe not the public, like the district like is enormously appreciative of the fundraising and the commitment that parents and community members engage in. It's so beneficial, like all the community involvement, you know, and yet at the same time, to get at what Mr. Albano was saying is like, when there are educational programmatic needs that are identified by the district wants to be responsive for those. Like it's not, you know, we need to figure out what are the things that our students need and figure out, you know, how we can pay for them, because it's the district's, you know, responsibility. But as Mr. Albano, you know, indicated, you know, certainly in partnership with the community, as you know, with the community as well.
Yes.
I hope I said that clearly. Yeah.
Definitely. No, we appreciate the community's support, but we want to just ensure that this occurs. And I'll just add that our architects have already provided us, for no extra cost, designs for a dugout, and we think it's something we could do here in our local community with some contractors and at a reasonable expense. Next, you're probably aware that the state has a requirement that at 82 degrees, we must make some adjustments to make sure our students and staff are comfortable and they can learn. At 88 degrees, you cannot be in a classroom. So with that, we know that all new renovations and the entire high school building at the end of the capital project will have central air conditioning. So this will be a non-issue. However, the main building is still a bit of a challenge. So we have some window units, we have some portable units, we have our auditorium, gymnasium that does have air conditioning. I believe my understanding is in past years when we had some heat, our principals did a great job of, you know, relocating classes. It's not ideal to have to double up or leave your classroom or move to an alternate space, but it is certainly better than being in a classroom that's 80 or 90 degrees and where students really have trouble learning. So what we are going to do, there's a small amount of money in this year's budget where we're going to assess, we're in the process of evaluating our heating system, records temperatures. We actually could look back at last year. We're looking at every hot day and looking at every classroom, morning, afternoons, and we're analyzing that data. We're going to strategically do some upgrades this spring before the warm weather, and then we would like to budget an amount, and we don't know the exact amount yet, but we will come back to you with an amount to do some upgrades. And again, I think in the main building, it's going to look like some window units as well as some portable units. And there may need to be some electrical upgrades as well to make sure we're not tripping fuses and things such as that. Or breakers, I should say. Next, upgrade auditorium, stage, and performing arts equipment. So just last week, Ms. Sniffen, myself, and Adam went backstage and we're shown a lot of needs that we have, and we have outstanding theater programs, as we will talk about. But I have to say that things are really in bad shape back there. So we had a leak many years ago. It did damage to a sound system. The storage is really tough back there. Some things aren't that expensive, just painting. Internally, we think we can use our team to refinish the floor. There's some repairs on the floor that need to be done. Lighting. So we're going to recommend a number of upgrades. Our theater program actually, from ticket sales and things such as that, actually has accumulated some money and potentially would like to donate probably in the range of maybe $10,000 or so. They're not certain yet. But we would then like to propose that the district also make an investment in upgrading that stage area and the equipment that they're using. Next, to transportation analysis. There are a lot of things that are interrelated. Our look at the site plan, our concerns about gridlock and especially during arrival, sometimes during dismissal, access for emergency vehicles, that all has come up, during the capital project planning. But also as we make a transition to EV, just talking about busing, is there potentially an appetite in the district to provide busing for all? That could potentially alleviate some gridlock and issues that we have here on the campus. I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying it's a consideration. If you provided it, there's some concern, maybe people wouldn't access it because you do have this beautiful campus and beautiful community. And I think people do enjoy walking to school and in some cases driving their children here to school. But maybe the district could make an effort to encourage use of buses, which again could potentially alleviate some of the traffic and crowding here and just make it all around safer. But we think a study should be done to determine that. There is also, we provide a lot of, I don't want to say door to door, but our students don't have to walk far, and you do have the ability to have community bus stops. So if you chose to maybe provide busing for more students, there is that potential to have community bus stops, safe places where students could gather, and instead of picking up one at this house and one at that house, maybe pick up 5 or 6 students in a location. And I'm not making a recommendation for any of these things, but I do think they are things that the district wants to consider. Transportation cost, even if you go to EV and get the grants, it's just continuing to go up. And of course, you want to keep your money focused on education and programs and students, but you have to balance, the responsibility of transporting students safely. So a study may be worthwhile. And I think Peggy and Maggie both, in our biweekly meetings have talked about that. So we're going to get some pricing on what a analysis cost and add that to the budget if the board agrees. And then lastly, fleet improvements. We've kind of covered this a few times, but for the upcoming year, we have, again, a large bus, end of life. We have a new smaller bus that we purchased last year that could be converted to all-wheel drive. Our higher elevations, you could have rain here on the main campus, and then we have families that live at higher elevations and they can have 3 or 4 inches of snow. And we had a day like that. So having an all-wheel smaller bus really solves that issue. And so we can transport those students safely and make sure everybody has a safe way to school. So this, again, we think it needs to happen. It would be great if this could be electric. And I know we have some community members that are really, would love to see us transition quickly, but I think realistically it'll take 2 years.
Just real quick on that, Carl. You're saying a lot of things about transportation. Overall, as a percentage of budget, transportation represents roughly.
Oh, I didn't bring that with me.
Rough. I won't hold you to it, Catherine.
25%. Oh, well, operations and facilities. I don't know if I have it broken down
Yeah.
just by transportation. I
Yeah.
can get that for you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, we'll do it later. We'll do it later. I got some questions in my head.
Yeah.
And because there's transportation, and then transportation is also broken down. We have, what percentages for transportation is for out of district placements, what percentage of, so there's a lot of different things within that. I hear what you're saying, but it's nice to be able to look at kind of
Yeah, I can get
what
that
each
for you.
what each breakdown is, because you might do like massive amounts of work on one thing and it would represent 0.5% of that budget. Meanwhile, if we looked at something else, it may be 4 or 5% of that type of budget.
Right, got that information. So now I'm going to invite Catherine up.
Talk money.
She'll talk about the dollars.
So we did receive our initial governor's proposal of state aid for next year. One of the biggest things we look for in our state aid is what our foundation aid is going to be. The governor's proposal did incorporate two key recommendations from the Rockefeller Institute study, which is a study that was done trying to revamp how to calculate foundation aid. And they have not agreed to all of them yet, but the two that were put in for this year is to utilize 2020 census data instead of 2000 census data, and to change the method for calculating the number of students from low-income families. So it does make small differences in how our foundation aid is going to be allocated this year. Under the new formula, we are projected to receive a 2% increase in our foundation aid. That is the minimum that any school district in New York is receiving this year. So we're receiving the minimum increase, and that is going to be an increase of $57,922 for the 25-26 school year based on the governor's proposal, subject to change as it goes through the legislative process. The other big portion of our state aid is our expense-based aids. It provides aid based on our actual expenditures for different services that we purchase, different programs that we provide. It's also calculated using our student enrollment numbers. And unfortunately, for 25-26, our aid is projected to decrease in building aid, transportation aid, BOCES aid, and private excess cost aid, with a total projected decrease of expense-based aids of $161,190. So our decrease is offsetting our increase in foundation aid. So right now we are looking at a reduction in state aid for next year's budget numbers.
Yeah, well, $100,000, more than, yes. Yeah, it's not an offset, that's a, yeah.
So, it can change. We expect additional information next week. It's going to change right up until the state sets their budget. So
Yeah, April.
we can see what happens. But some of this is enrollment, some of it is different services that we don't need. I mean, it's calculated based on a formula that we don't have any control over our enrollment, or and we obviously only spend where we need to spend. So. Property tax cap obviously you all know that our biggest driver of our revenue is our taxes, our school taxes. It's subject to a property tax cap, which establishes a tax levy limit for all municipalities and school districts. It sets the total levy that we can assess, and it says it's 2%, but it's also calculated using assessments and equalization rates. So it's not like we come in and say our tax cap is 2%. And just a reminder that although our revenue drives the budgets, the voters approve the budget number, not our tax levy. So it's just they're approving the amount that they're authorizing us to spend. They don't approve the actual tax levy. Through all the calculations that we do to come up with our allowable property tax levy, our percentage this year is 3.38%, higher than normal. That does equate to a potential tax levy increase of $770,000 that we would be able to use to increase next year's school budget. Questions? I think that was all I was going to talk about for money tonight.
So I have a question. So this is just occurring. So if it's increasing, a potential tax levy increase of $770,000, but that doesn't necessarily translate into an increase in the budget of $770,000, because it does or it doesn't. Because I was thinking of, Ezra pointed out that our net state aid is going down by $100,000.
So what I do is, and some of it I'm going to talk about on the next slide, is I come up with what our rollover budget is. So that takes this year's budget numbers, and I calculate for everything that is mandated and we have no choice. So our contracted salary increases, our health insurance premium increases, changes to our ERS and TRS contributions, things that we just have to do no matter what. And then I also take into account known increases that maybe you have a choice on, but it's keeping things consistent. then I know, about where I think the budget at a minimum would have to be. Then I start looking at our revenue numbers. So from revenue, it's tuition numbers from, kids who tuition into the district. It's our state aid, it's our tax cap, it's whether we want to use any fund balance to balance the budget. So it's it kind of takes all of that into account. We're not to right now where the numbers are going to come out, but like right now, when you look at that, if we could increase the tax levy by 770 without changing anything, we know that's really down to 670 because we have to offset the 100,000 that we're losing in state aid.
Yeah. And this is still just off the governor's proposal.
Correct.
Which, won't be finalized until
Right.
the zero line.
Right. We have a long way to go before
Yeah.
we know the final numbers. The good news in all of it, and on our revenue, we don't usually have a lot of ways that we can increase our revenue, but we have been very conservative in our projections for interest income, and we keep earning more interest income on our accounts than we have budgeted for because the interest rate environment has been strong.
Sure.
It is decreasing, but I do think we have some ability to make up some of that by just counting on some interest income to stay at least higher than I had budgeted for last year. We're coming in way over budget again with our, we were conservative again last year with knowing that the prediction was that interest rates were going to drop. And we could have been a little bit more aggressive with our revenue projections for interest income.
Do we have an idea yet of the tuition income, the revenue from tuition?
I don't have an actual number yet, but from our projections, it appears that we will have more students join us than are leaving us. So that will be an increase it should be an increase in tuition dollars for next year, which will also help. So
I think roughly we have about 5 additional students year over year, which would equate to maybe $90,000 in, or 90 to 100,000 in additional revenue year over year.
Okay. Just so you know what we're still working on, our next steps, again, I talked to you about the rollover budget. That's going to give us a much better idea of where we stand. I am probably about 75% through it, still finishing up some salary numbers, but health benefit numbers, but we're getting close with knowing where that will be. I have been meeting, and Carl has been meeting with the administrative team. I've done one-on-ones with every administrator to get their wish list or the things that they deem necessary for operating the school district next year. So we're getting prices on that. I'm running some analysis on it, and what I do once I come up with my rollover budget and then I look at my projected revenue, I kind of come up with a number of, okay, what can we spend? And then that's when we start prioritizing all the different requests from the administrative team. And we say, we can do this, we're not sure we can do this. So that is the process that we're going through right now. And again, as we talked, we're going to keep monitoring state budget developments. It goes right. I mean, honestly, up to the last day. I remember last year, the Saturday and Sunday before we presented the budget on Tuesday, I was in the office because the state aid numbers had changed over the weekend. So I was having to make some adjustments to the budget right up to the weekend before we gave you our proposed budget.
Right, because I don't have the budget calendar in front of me, but you give it to us.
I do.
It's all down right there. Right.
We'll present our recommended budget on March 4th. And then we'll have our pre-budget hearing in March 18th. I'll give you all our estimated revenues and our tax levy projection April 1st. And then hopefully you can adopt the budget on April 22nd. It has to be adopted on April 22nd. And we'll hold our public hearing May 6th and vote for it on May 20th.
Catherine, just real quick, it has to be adopted on April 22nd, even if there is a lag by the state?
Yes.
So even if they don't tell you what your actual aid numbers are, you have to.
Yeah,
Because that
our-
makes,
Right, our
common
property
sense.
tax report card is due within 24 hours of budget adoption, but also we have a deadline at the last day that we can turn
Right.
that in, so.
There were a few years, Ezra, in
Yeah.
the past where they went into the summer. But the school districts need to move forward. And I will say, that 2% seems pretty certain for foundation aid.
I would agree.
Our expense-based aid, that's a pretty
Probably
accurate.
normal. So it's always little things on the side, then it's not gonna be.
I don't see any major changes. Look, anything could happen up in Albany, but I think what we showed you this evening is probably where we will land as far as state aid.
Okay.
So, this evening, again, we wanted to give you some preliminary information just to get you thinking. This is really the information that we have. I want to thank the admin team. They've really been thoughtful. They're working very hard. They're continuing to analyze enrollment and schedules, and to see if there's any other, savings or efficiencies that we can find. And again, I'm very confident that, by March 4th, we'll have a comprehensive budget recommendation and presentation for the board. I will also point out a lot of the priorities, as you probably noticed, are one-time expenditures. So, when you increase staffing, that's, year after year after year of increases. Many of the things we're proposing are really one-time expenditures, and we're hoping that we could accomplish them because I believe they're all really valid and needed and would improve, the quality of experience for our students. However, if the board, if we're not able to, and if our goal is to stay, within the levy or some other number, maybe some of those things would have to wait. Okay, we're hopeful that we can make this all work, but we're just not there yet to really have that in-depth discussion. If that makes sense.
No, it does.
Really appreciate that. It was a big year for everybody with the capital equipment pass for the taxpayers, so it'll be interesting to hear what you guys come up with. It's kind of thankless in a way, so we appreciate it.
Any talk about changes to funding from the feds? We don't get much out of there, so it doesn't have much impact on us anyway.
Yeah, it's
Title I and then any
Yeah, well, and that
IDA.
has.
But IDA legislation, IDA funding though, right?
Yeah, but it
Yes.
has no implication on our budget numbers because it is in addition to our budget. It's, it's the supplement,
Gotcha.
not supplement, and so
Yeah.
you aren't supposed to have anything included in your budget, your general fund budget, that is you're using your federal funds for.
Okay, and that's ESSA and anything else too, right? Okay.
But it is still only, I want to say like $50,000.
It's been increasing a little.
$30,000.
No, it is more than that. I can obviously walk you through that one time if you're ever interested in seeing what we do. But yeah, it's not anything that, if we lost federal funding, that would be horrible because it does cover some salaries and some positions that, you'd have to make a really tough decision as to whether you figured out a way to bring them into your budget,
Right.
or if you had to eliminate the position. So
And you're talking about positions that are subsidized through Medicaid? Mostly?
positions that are subsidized by the federal fund, like the Title I,
Title I.
Title IV, six, IDEA grants.
Yeah.
Just for a little historical perspective on the New York State side, the expense-based aid, does that typically go down year after year, or do we have some years where we actually see the BOCES money go up? And
Yes.
so it kind of year by year,
Correct.
okay, it fluctuates. It's not like every year we're seeing a continual decrease in that funding.
This is I haven't been here that long, 3 years, but it's the first year that it was this level.
Yeah,
I've
I'm
seen
surprised to
some go
see
up, some go
it look
down.
quite
This is one where
big.
it's pretty consistently. I think we only had one category that went up by, and they only went up by three,
No.
A few thousand.
a few thousand, yeah. So it really can't offset the larger ones.
And we already have our CRS projection for next year of what we have to do. And is that higher or?
One don't have it in front of me, which one is going up slightly, one is going down slightly, so it's really kind of a, you know, not
But
gonna be a
those-
big.
That was more in TRS though, right?
But those are all much more than 3% typically. No,
Not the increase,
no, I think the increase, okay.
the increase is not,
Oh, okay.
one is going
No.
down by about 0.5%, and the other one, I believe, is going up around 1%.
Okay.
I
Because historically, there was one, I think, in the TRS where it jumped significantly.
Last year, we were able to take, it's called an exclusion on your allowable tax levy limit because it jumped more than, if it jumps more than 2%, there is a adjustment that we make when we calculate our allowable tax levy that allows for that increase that is unexpected and out of your control. But it's
Okay.
at 2%.
Thank you.
We know health is 4.9, so that is one area that is increasing disproportionately compared to our revenue.
And our
Yeah.
actual insurance, just covering the building and the, that is, last year was, it was like, it ended up being like almost 14%, and they're not expecting it to be a low increase this year.
Yeah, well, the business model is having a tough time. And the 4.9 on the health insurance is we buy into a consortium, correct?
Correct.
We do. It's Putnam, Northern Westchester School Districts.
Right, yeah.
I know you said that we're not going to be adding any positions, but do we anticipate or expect to be any staff that's retiring? Do we have any positions that we anticipate replacing in the next school year?
Good question. We did take a look at that. Right now, we have no notifications of retirements. Looking, 2 to 3 years out, there may be some people that become eligible. Doesn't mean they'll retire, but just looking at the numbers and number of years they have in, you do have, next 2 to 3 years, some people becoming eligible. And, quite frankly, that may be a time, to look at enrollment and things such as that, and potentially, by attrition. So there are, if you decided to, reduce your staff, you could do it without someone losing their job. And if someone retires, maybe just not replace them.
Yeah.
But it's hard to say from now, Sean, if that's going to be possible. I think a lot of that really depends on enrollment numbers at particular grade levels. So we will be hard at work over the next 3 weeks,
Thank you.
and we'll have more detailed information. Transportation, Ezra, we heard. We'll take a closer look at that. We'll do a slide on healthcare cost and other cost drivers, so you understand. Certainly, we'll review the state aid again, not just for the board, but for the public. And we'll come back with a recommendation on March 4th, and then the board will, of course, have to deliberate and have final say over what that tax increase will be.
Yeah, just the transportation, there's a lot in what Carl was saying, and I think I'll be interested to see how much of our budget is, but even if it's not a huge percentage, I feel like one of the things we've found over the years is every place we can make some sort of efficiencies. Well, there's 2 ways you could go, right? You could either become more like efficient, right? So figure out a way to do more with less, right? If that was something that you wanted to do, or even just really better understand how are people getting here? Is that the best? How are we using our buses? Which students are we busing? And really just getting a better handle on it. There've been a couple of years where, there's a lot of things that we're dealing with. We're dealing with a mountain. We're dealing with a community where there aren't sidewalks everywhere. Like there are really, even though it's small, it's a complicated. My understanding is that it's complicated, and yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you do need to also remember that we do maintain a relatively small fleet, and it has to take care of things other than just busing students to Haldane each day. It is all the out of district placements,
Right.
and it's also we have a pretty robust sports program.
Correct.
There's a sports bus, at least
Right.
one sports bus going out most nights, and
Yeah.
cycling that, and the use of the buses and the use of the drivers does tend to end up with overtime costs that are associated with that. So looking at the
And we also
transportation
looked at that
spending.
even with the EV and the charging rates and, you know, being able, you know, we have buses that are being used constantly that don't actually have much of a downtime. You know, the idea, I just charge it during the day, you know, like, well, to be honest, the bus isn't really sitting there as
Right,
much as you
exactly.
think.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that is a real implication for as the, you know, assuming, well, anticipating that the mandate to the transition to electric vehicles goes into place, right? Like, we don't have buses that just can sit and be
Yeah.
charged. You know, our buses, it's a pretty, it's already a pretty efficient fleet,
Yeah.
but just understanding better all the different.
And that will,
It is lean.
there are all just, you know, there's like 3 main types of chargers, and obviously the one that will turn around a bus the quickest is the most expensive charger that you can have, so.
Yeah. Well, it is, you know, it's the advantage of keeping a lean fleet for us and also a disadvantage for keeping a lean fleet for us, but it would be hard to justify to the community. Let's make sure we have as many buses as possible not doing anything.
Yeah, I know.
Right, exactly.
Whereas right now we keep less buses and they're moving, they're working, they're doing what they need to do. Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you very much. Yeah, we thought that this initial presentation of all the things that they're thinking about before we get to the actual presentation.
Yeah, I think it's great.
The nitty gritty.
Yeah, it's like, because it's a lot, budget season every year, it's a lot of information.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, yeah, good work.
All right, so we're now to the point of our meeting where there's an opportunity for communication from the public. This is about, so the Haldane Board of Education desires and values input from the entire school community. This first public comment session is reserved for comments on any special presentations or active agenda items. For those who wish to address the board, we'd ask that you sign in and state your name. We'd ask you to keep your remarks to 3 minutes or less. We discourage disparaging remarks or discussion of district personnel. And while the board would not engage in dialogue, we'd want you to know that we're listening. And we'd ask you to leave your contact information with our district clerk so that Mr. Albano and myself can follow up. Okay, next on the agenda, we have our information reports that we'll be acting on at our next business meeting. And then we're going to go into the consent agenda minutes. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And consent agenda financial. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And on to consent agenda personnel. May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And moving on to unfinished business. I mean, just so that the community knows, those who are watching, we're moving along as planned. The board met with our search consultants, PNW BOCES, last night. We have a slate of highly qualified semifinals candidates that we'll be interviewing next week. And then, you know, as planned, through the rest of February, we'll have our semifinalist interviews and then interviews with our finalists, and expecting to announce the new superintendent in the spring.
No,
It's a
great.
very exciting time. And so now, after having our conversations over the past couple of weeks and our very eventful public hearing, it's now time for the resolution to amend the volunteer firefighter and the ambulance worker tax exemption. May we have the recommended action?
Whereas pursuant to real property tax section Tax Law, Section 466A, the Board of Education of the Haldane Central School District adopted the property tax exemption for eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers, permitting residential property exemptions of 5% for eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers residing within the Haldane Central School District and who have served a minimum of 2 years within the district. And whereas the Board of Education wishes to amend the property tax exemption for eligible volunteer firefighters and ambulance workers by increasing the partial tax exemption from 5% to 10%. Therefore, be it further resolved that the Board of Education, after holding a public hearing on February 4, 2025, and giving the public an opportunity to be heard, hereby amends the property tax exemption by increasing the tax exemption to 10% for eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers residing within the Haldane Central School District who have served a minimum of 2 years in an incorporated volunteer fire company or incorporated volunteer ambulance service within the district, and be it further resolved that the lifetime property tax exemption approved by the Board of Education on February 27th, 2024 of 10% on the primary residence of eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers with 20 years of service within an incorporated volunteer fire company or incorporated volunteer ambulance service within the district and who maintain their primary residence within the district will remain unchanged. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby increases the property tax exemption to 10% for eligible unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers who had at least 20 years of applicable service, subject to the requirements of Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education further increases the property tax exemption to 10% to eligible unremarried spouses of deceased eligible volunteer firefighters and volunteer ambulance workers who died in the line of duty and had at least 5 years of applicable service, subject to the requirements of Real Property Tax Law, Section 466A. Be it further resolved that the district clerk is directed to send a certified copy of this resolution to the assessors of any municipality which comprises the Haldane Central School District. And be it further resolved that this resolution will take effect immediately.
All right.
Fantastic.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Is there anything else? I don't think we need to say anything else about this. All right. All those in
Fantastic.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So at our last meeting, Mr. Albano presented one possibility for the district calendar. Big thanks to Ms. Shields for sending out to the community and ask for feedback. And we did get some engagement for this. And so what we have now are a possible, an alternative to think about. And I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Albano to tell us more.
Sure. The calendar, the draft calendar that we presented to the board last meeting was very similar to the BOCES calendar. And there are some advantages to staying consistent with BOCES. What we basically had was a full February break. So the week of February 16th, the entire week off, which is really a New York thing. Other states don't have February breaks, but it is commonplace here in New York. But not every district, and there's certainly no requirement to maintain it. Some of the feedback we received was that why not extend the winter break around the Christmas holiday to 2 full weeks? Because to have a full February week off, you needed to reduce that Christmas break by 2 days, and students would need to come in. The argument is that, well, gee, if people travel, you may have low attendance on those 2 days. Also, there was some concern about typically the Monday after Easter, that people travel that spring break. And in past years, when possible, we've offered the Monday after Easter Sunday as an extension of spring break. So basically, you really have it. I think, in my opinion, it kind of boils down to two things. The board has final say on this. We did get input from our faculty, from our admin team, and we did present that calendar, but certainly there's some community members who I think would be okay with reducing February break by 3 days, adding 2 days to the Christmas break, and potentially a day after the spring break, after Easter Monday. That is an option. We would be, probably one of just a few districts that don't have a full February break, but my understanding is in past years, Haldane
There
has
were a
done
number
that.
of years we didn't have it, yeah.
Yeah,
It does create an issue, but the BOCES has the February break, right?
They do.
So then we would effectively we would have students who would be here who would normally go to BOCES at that time. And they would be in school doing what?
We haven't figured that out yet. So I think there may be a few options. Either we transport them to BOCES if it's a half-day program, we transport them for the half day, or potentially we have to bring in some staff to do some teaching on those mornings.
Does this also include our students that are in out-of-district placement, that's non-BOCES, if they're on a different calendar, or since they are in that separate district,
We follow that calendar, Sean. So if children are placed in out-of-district, we will transport whatever that district calendar is.
So one of the things is, I just kind of remember like not being on the BOCES calendar created issues as well. So we weren't on it, but then there were little interesting things with kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not always on the BOCES calendar. So I think it's important. Those students' experiences are very important, but I think it's important to keep in mind that both the BOCES, it's juniors and seniors, and it's not all of the juniors and seniors, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about the calendar for what's going to be basically pre-K 8. I think this is kind of a hard decision because, there's real reason to be on the BOCES calendar. There is this tradition of having this February break. New York State now recognizes a lot of religious holidays. For Catholics, the Monday after Easter is a religious holiday, as I understand it. I'm looking to my colleagues who are Catholic.
It's a Polish
Yeah, it's a
holiday.
Polish-
I don't know if
Certain-
it's,
I don't
No,
I don't know
it's
if it's a
not.
holiday. I
so.
think it's
Religious
bank
it's
holiday.
helpful for people who travel. I
Right.
think that's
That's it. Oh, because some of the people talked about it as being a religious holiday. Like one of the community members said that Easter Monday is a religious holiday. And so I don't know. I'm not Catholic.
It's not a bank holiday, and I know
Yeah.
like some groups of Catholics like it's Dingus Day, which is a Polish holiday, always the day after Easter, but I don't think it's specifically a Catholic
Yeah, I think-
holiday.
So here's just in the idea, real quick, of you sent out a calendar that had the February break on it, seeking feedback.
Mhm.
So people who appreciate the February break would
Yeah.
obviously not provide feedback.
Mhm.
So would you then seek out feedback from individuals who like the February break if on a calendar of which you send out
Yeah.
that would not have it?
I mean,
It would almost be.
it's a collective decision for us
Yeah.
to make.
Well, it'd be an
I mean,
interesting, it's an interesting set of filtering.
It
right?
is. No, it
Yeah.
absolutely is.
What's,
Go ahead.
what's interesting is one of the folks that we got feedback from
is a faculty member, and she had mentioned that there used to be like a calendar committee. So I was
There
just-
is still a
There's still
calendar
a
committee,
And
and
they
that
weighed in on this.
that calendar committee is who contributed to the first draft.
Okay.
Yes.
And it's made up of faculty members, administrators, and some CSEA.
Yeah.
So that still exists, and they were part of the original draft. They were not part of this second version.
As far as support for I think your point is good, that people aren't necessarily going to be emailing. I did notice somebody on Facebook mentioned, did not like the February break. And there were so many, just a multitude of comments supporting the February break for so many reasons, saying so we might not have heard it
Right.
via email. But people are making the argument it's actually good for dealing with illnesses, like say we're, in the midst of flu season, it's actually nice for kids to have, it kind of breaks up gets kids out of school at a, time of,
Thank you for being on social media.
Yeah, right.
I know.
Serves the purpose every once in a while.
I've gotten away from
Right.
social media.
All those bots are very.
So
I really, yeah, I mean,
So did
I
see
do.
a lot of support and, numerous are, just that, didn't like the years that Haldane had moved away from it, yay, it's back. We don't want to lose it again. That sort of thing.
That's so helpful. I really appreciate that.
And that was there was a Facebook post initially posted. She didn't like the February break of her opinion because it's hard for working parents.
Yeah,
to-
childcare.
Oh, yeah.
She was looking for like a camp or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. This
So-
year, it seems one of the arguments I've heard, and this was articulated in one of these emails, is about how complicated it is for the 2 weeks of Christmas. And I think some people are thinking about bartering these days because they feel like if we have these February days, that means that I'm going to take my child out of school. And there's nothing you can do about it. You can have school if you want, but I'm not going to be here. And that is how it works. Like I've done it. I've never been here. We take 2 weeks off every year. It's like that's the way we do it. And I think there are a lot of families who would also appreciate that. So
Right.
that is the only compelling argument this year for me, because Christmas falls on a
Right.
particular day that happens to fall this year on Wednesday. The notion that you're going to have kids there all the way up until the day before Christmas Eve is onerous to a lot of people.
Right.
So, but that's very specific to this year, and it doesn't.
And then there are people like me who would have sent their child to school when school's in session, no matter what.
that's right.
You know?
Yeah.
I'm a everyday.
Like,
The difference with us is that we love our family.
Yeah.
Are you suggesting?
I do want to say Easter Monday is a
That's
Catholic
fine.
holiday. It's
I
cel-
thought Easter Monday.
by the Eastern Orthodox, specifically Eastern Orthodox. So I just want to, say for the record, since I had just recently commented that I didn't think it was a Catholic holiday because I grew up Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
It is celebrated by certain.
Well, Christmas is
groups
also
within-
January, is also the Epiphany.
January
So
6th
it's
is
January
January.
6th.
That's right.
Right. So in the Eastern tradition,
You
so
want
you're going to wind up getting into a lot
So
of
there are
extra.
some services.
As soon as you begin to move, so in my opinion, as
So-
soon as you
Put that out
begin to move away from the BOCES.
So we have a couple of choices. I mean,
It does get complicated.
it's interesting. We always send the calendar out and ask for feedback.
And never
We
get it.
never get it.
Yeah.
And this year we got 6 whole emails.
I do like the idea that if we don't give the Easter Monday off the day after Easter, that I like the idea of that being the first give back snow day,
That's
as
a fair-
opposed to the May
That's a fair.
dates.
That's a fair.
That could be the first one.
So I don't know. There's a part of me that, I'm trying to be.
It's a hard decision for you.
Well, no,
Putting
because I'm
it
actually
on
trying to
you.
think about. I mean, there's a part of me that's going to reserve my own personal opinions because they're not really that meaningful in this particular setting. But that does really recognize that the calendar was put together by a committee, right? That was put together by a committee of CSCA representatives, HSFA representatives. It's also in line with BOCES. I can see 2 ways of going forward. I can see we could wait. We don't have to approve the calendar tonight. We don't have to.
Yeah,
So I think because it is unusual for us to get feedback on the calendar, and it sounds like there has been conversation about it, there's 2 ways we could go. We could approve one of the calendars tonight and we'd have to decide which one we wanted to approve, or we could wait one more set of meetings and hear what else we hear. I think the one thing that I do want to emphasize that Mr. Albano said is some of the things about the calendar, in particular, the plan for the school start date, the plan for the PD days, those were arrived at by the HFA and the CSEA, and those I think are those are given. I don't think that's not something we're talking about right now, is we're gonna change when school starts, we're gonna change when those PD days are. That's a piece of the calendar that comes from the faculty and staff and is in line also with BOCES, and I think that's pretty much, I don't hear any conversation among the board right now or any push from the folks in the district in a big way about changing those dates. So that's one thing I would like to sort of establish. I think we might want to establish as a given.
I would like to ask, because there have been a couple teachers kind of saying that those 2 days prior to the start of the school year will be difficult, and I noticed that looking at this year's calendar, there was one conference day prior to the beginning of the school year, and then there was, the one in November, the one in March, and then there was one at the very end of the school year, June. And next year we won't have that one at the end of June because we're doing the 2 in August.
Right.
Is one of the reasons for doing the 2 in August, is that typical, or is part of it because we're going to have a new superintendent and the new superintendent will need that time with teachers?
Great question. So in historically 1 day, many districts were at 1 day. In recent years, most districts have moved to 2. The reason why is they're just simply more required trainings. So to give you an example of just 2, one are IEP reviews. So every teacher who has a child with a 504 or IEP has to go through a review of the program, the accommodations, the needs prior to the child stepping foot in the building. So you should be, and the idea behind it is a logical one. You should have and be well prepared and know everything there is to need to know about the children. That's a challenge with only 1 day, because you think about rotating in and out. Regina Cashin's office organizes that. You want to be really thorough with that. Another are safety trainings. So reviewing all of our lockdown procedures. And that, by the way, is not pleasant. It's not like a great way to start the school year when you're thinking about, but it's something that is a requirement. We must be prepared once again. You must, know all the emergency protocol. So those alone could really take up a day.
Yeah.
Then there is, whether it's a new superintendent or returning superintendent, there is always a formal welcome back of the staff and introducing new staff and some of that traditional stuff that takes place. And then there's a whole host of other things. So I would argue you could use 3 or 4 days, but you just don't have that many PD days in the contract. But I must say, and I think I was a strong voice, but I do think I had a lot of support even from our teachers that 2 days is really what's needed. I would recommend not just with your new superintendent, but going forward. I understand it's coming in at the end of the summer, but most districts, there are a few contracts where teachers don't start till after Labor Day. But imagine how challenging if we did PD after Labor Day. Now you even have a more challenging calendar, right? So it may not be best for everyone, but I would argue that it'll reduce your stress if you're well prepared for your students' arrival, as opposed to increase your stress because you're here in August. I get it may interfere with vacation plans, but I think it's the right thing to do.
It just also happens that Labor Day falls on the 1st.
On the 1st.
Right. So it really.
So, I mean, that's not how it is normally. To Carl's point, we have now 2 days where I work. There is a lot that happens in those first couple days. And, there is more put on teachers year in, and you're out, besides just teach the kids, which is a really simplistic statement. And so those days, it's beyond just that. You have department meetings. You're reviewing curriculum yet again. And by the way, when Carl says you have to have this information about students, this is oftentimes student schedules are not really 100% set, right? Until right then and there. And so you'll get, even if you prepared, inevitably things change right before they're in their seat. And so there is quite a bit that happens prior to day one, quote unquote, with
That
students.
all totally makes sense to me. Just, since there were a couple comments coming in, it's
Sure.
really good to hear the background.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question about the February break? While I understand the wisdom of waiting, it would be wise if we're going to wait that we have some action items that we're waiting on. Or is it that we want to gather more information about this, or
Well, I
what
think-
would we be waiting for? More
Yeah,
deliberation?
Ezra asked a good question about having shared one and not the second. While I personally don't think we'll ever reach any type of consensus,
Right.
even the calendar committee didn't receive this new draft that the
yeah, I
board
think we should,
requested,
yeah.
so that's a possibility.
I think that makes sense. I think we should wait for that.
Great.
I mean, I did, and someone,
Because that has
Megan says
representation across CSEA
And admin and
and
HFA.
admin and HFA. They help put it together, throw that idea back to them, see what comes back. And
yeah.
Great.
I mean, again, we asked to hear from the community. We heard from the community. I think even when you hear just a few people from the community, it means something. It doesn't mean nothing.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's a huge rush. And I agree. I don't know if we have to send. I don't know. Personally, I don't think we have to send this new. I don't think we have to send this alternate calendar as a blast. But I do definitely think we do definitely need to share it with the calendar committee. What do people think about that? So in terms of the next steps, is sharing it with the calendar committee, having them come back.
And the parts, the parts that we're interested in having them weigh in on are just February break, the holiday recess, and Easter Monday.
The winter holiday recess and Easter Monday, yeah.
I'll just bring up one other consideration, and certainly we'll go back to the faculty, and I don't want to speak for them, but just having done this for many years, I think when you're not aligned with other districts, so
It's a problem.
and you have children in public schools, whether it be in Beacon or Brewster or Put Valley, wherever they may be, if they have a February break and we don't, then for teachers with children who are in public schools, that does become a challenge for them.
That's huge.
But again, but I will say, we will serve here. We're employees of the district. This is a calendar for the Haldane school community. It's just a consideration. And look, maybe the teachers, I could be wrong, but I think I've done it enough where it would create a challenge for those with school-age children. But I certainly can, let's give them that opportunity to give us feedback.
I think so.
Probably important for them to know just that we put the second draft together in response to some community concerns, not that we somehow think that this is a preferential option.
It was absolutely, and that's definitely true. It's like this would be an alternative. What do people think about it? And I think the calendar is the calendar is clearly a big deal, right? Because we heard from somebody here and other people,
We heard from a staff member too.
Well, teachers follow. So if you think about it, that calendar, that's your work life. Our bell schedule is like we eat based on a bell. We go to the bathroom based on a bell. You have everything charted out.
Right.
It's just a really interesting life to be controlled by these things.
We all left it behind when we were 17 or 18.
Yeah, thanks, pal. I'm an adult that follows a child's schedule. Thank you. But it is actually quite important. So I understand why we got feedback from educators, and I understand why we have feedback from people in the community, because it is significant. So I do find it actually it's nice to see the board recognize that, be able to provide, a possible alternative, and to send it back. I think we are in agreement, right? To send it back to the calendar committee to get to see what they think. And
You just say no, absolutely not, and just move on with what we do.
Yeah.
And you don't do that, and we don't do that, so that's nice.
Yeah, right.
Some days.
And maybe someone made the point earlier, maybe staff members will enjoy a few days off with their children in school. So that could be the case.
All right, well, thanks to everybody for thinking about this. It is a big deal. All right, so the only thing we have left on our agenda is new business, which is CSE, CPSE recommendations. Maybe have the recommended action.
Be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the interim superintendent of schools, the Board of Education hereby approves the recommendations of the committees on special education and preschool special education as presented.
You have a motion, please?
So moved.
second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we're now at the opportunity for our second communication from the public on any district matters. And then an opportunity for board reflections.
I'll just reiterate that the process of looking for a new superintendent, led by Peggy, led by Maggie, has been so expertly handled. And I really appreciate all the work that you have done and the support from our friends at BOCES. And I respect our team's attention to detail as we think about what we're looking for, and just have a lot of respect for y'all. So thank you so much.
That's a great point. I felt the meeting yesterday was excellent. Very valuable. Very I'm forgetting the word here, but I walked out of there being like, this feels good.
Yeah.
It feels really good.
Well, I actually emailed the administrative team just to give them an update the same way, a little more detail. But one of the things I said then, which I'll say now, is that, the district's attracting really highly qualified candidates, and I think it just speaks so much to the work that the administrators and the teachers do here. And, I know we're also appreciative of their work, but it really speaks to, the community. The community has really, historically, and is now really, unified for the most part, but really quite unified in supporting the school district. And I think that speaks very well for our community. And I think we're going to reap all the different investments that we make in our district. I think I'm hopeful that they'll pay off in a great long-term superintendent. So
Access to high quality public education that is created by this community is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And it's a positive thing that attracts people that want to work here. And that's great.
I think so.
Yeah.
But Sean, thank you very much. Much appreciated.
Just want to address a student concern actually that came up when I was on the middle school tour, which was wonderful. We had a conversation with a bunch of kids before we went on the tour. And one of the students is concerned about moving to a 5 through 8 model if the arts department does not expand, especially in the realm of theater. There were cuts made, right, in these school performances this year. And I think she's concerned that if we're bringing more kids on and we only do one middle school play, what that'll end up looking like. So talked to her a little bit more about it afterwards too. And, she's like, I think we really should do one for the 5th and 6th grade and then one for the 7th and 8th grade. There are different maturity levels also. So I just want to put that out there that that's something that I think we should take seriously.
Yeah, I actually thought about that because the elementary play is 4th and 5th grade, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting way to
to think about that, but thank you so much for.
Sure. And also, Ezra was there too at the HSF trivia night, which is always a good time. And I just want to say there was a lot of new parents there, which was really cool to see because that's such a great way for parents to get familiar with the Haldane environment. And it brings back some of the old, alumni who have graduated kids too. So it's just a really great way
It was a
to
phenomenal
gel as a
event.
community.
I buried my memory of it because I did not come in first with my team. So, but thank you for bringing back that. It was a great,
Yeah, it was
great
so
night.
much
And HSF continues to really run great events and support the kids here, which is incredible.
That's great.
It's
It's nice.
huge.
My husband
Yeah.
usually goes. He had something to do in Manhattan, but
Yeah.
it is fun because it is an event that still attracts families. The students aren't in the district any
Yep.
longer.
Mhm.
And it's great to hear it's new families. That's very fun. I don't
And
think
it
that
was
happens very often.
Pretty packed, actually.
Yeah.
It's always
and,
packed.
and absolutely uproarious. Phenomenal time.
Yeah, good. Thank you to that. Thank you for bringing that up. Right. Anything? Do you have anything?
Last thought, I will just related to what you said earlier. I want to say publicly that attracting a superintendent, I'm sure, and I'm not surprised that you have a strong response and some high quality candidates. The governance model that's in place and the board members really matters. Superintendents work so closely with their boards, and your success really depends on having a board that is serving with good intentions. And this board really does a great job at that. And I would imagine the candidates have not only researched the district, but also taken a close look at the board. And I just say, you're not going to say that, but you really deserve a lot of compliments. And I'm sure the next superintendent will be in a good place with the support of this board.
Thank you. Thank you. Much appreciated. All right. So I move to adjourn the meeting. May I have a second, please?
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?